Hey guys, Freaky Finance here. Today we're going to look at something a little bit different. It's not a stock idea per se, it's more of a general shift in my thinking. And oh yeah, behind me we're starting to get ready for Halloween. So anyway, today we are going to talk about some COVID-19 vaccine trade ideas. Basically, a lot of sources have been saying phase 3 results are slated to be put before the FDA by the third week of November. And specifically that's Pfizer. But there's also going to be Moderna and a couple other ones that are going to be right behind it, according if they still stick to their schedule as of today's date, which is October 24th. Anyway, it got me digging, so I figured I'd better do a video on it because the digging to all of a sudden 10 hours later, I was like, I better write some of this or put some of this down. So a lot of these slides are from MIT, so in their biology department. So I'll put some links to some videos below for source material. It's very interesting if you guys take a chance to look at it. Most of the videos are an hour long, so a little bit lengthy. I'm going to go a little bit quicker, try to just get as much information as I can out as quick as I can. Basically, coronavirus, as some people say, it's just like the common cold, but technically it is and it isn't. And most things are nuanced like that. You can see the common cold right here on this first little slide here is this yellow. That's the common cold gene. The one that's has the world in a global pandemic is SARS-CoV-2 over here. Very similar to SARS-CoV-1. CoV-1 was didn't affect as many people, but it was very fatal. Whereas this one affects a lot of people, technically isn't very fatal, but relative to SARS-1, safe to say, less fatal if you get it for most people. Again, I want to say I'm not a doctor. Obviously, if you have COVID, you should go to a doctor or get tested. That goes without saying, but I want to just go through some science first because it helps view the vaccine, perhaps the timelines, and perhaps some ideas for investing. Basically, the virus has RNA, and that's the main payload for the virus. And really, we're just going to talk about two parts of the virus. It's this RNA, as well as the spike protein. And so this RNA is what gets, I'm going to go through the binding a little bit, but basically it goes into your cell, and it starts reproducing itself. It has some other things in there to help evade your body's defenses, but that's pretty much the function. The spike protein is the other interesting part of this. So one is the RNA, which is the largest RNA we've ever seen for a virus, and the other one is the spike protein. So this other part right here, and that's the part a lot of people talk about, and that's the part that actually will stick or bind to your ACE2 receptor. So once the RNA is in our cells, its replication is like a factory. It's really more like copying itself instead of what you'd think is reproduction. However, the copy is random length, so it copies subcopies of itself. But this virus has the ability to catch its errors, which is interesting. Other viruses do have that as well, but this seems to have high accuracy at catching its own errors. And that's even more interesting because, like I just stated, the RNA on this virus is the longest I think we've ever seen for a virus, for a coronavirus. Just for reference, I just put here the COVID-19 RNA is more than 2 times the length of influenzas. Viruses are different than bacteria, so I just want to put that here. So viruses are parasitic, and what that means is that they require your cells or tissue to grow and make copies of itself. Basically, they invade the cells of your body and then use your own body to replicate itself. And some virus will even kill the host cells as part of their life cycle. So this binding site is the main source of a lot of the vaccines we're going to talk about. RBD is on the part of the virus, and basically it stands up to bind to the ACE2, which is your cell. And most vaccines are going to target this site specifically, because this is the site where the virus interacts first with the cell. And the interesting thing about this virus is that it's very good. It has a high affinity to find the cell and bind with it. And I wanted to put the sites that the cells that have ACE2 receptors on them. And there's quite a few cells all over your body that have ACE2 receptors. So this basically says where the COVID virus is likely to bind to in your body. This image was very good. So you can see the antibodies are these little Y-shaped things. They bind to these RBDs so that they can't get to your ACE2 receptors. They're not able to bind with these anymore as long as the antibodies are already attaching to them. The antibodies also need an affinity, obviously, to the RBD in order to stick and hold onto them and not let go. The higher the affinity, the better the results. when COVID gets in, so this orange line here, again, that's the payload. So that's the RNA that's now in your body, that's the viruses. And so what it's going to do now is going to start reproducing itself. And it's basically going to hijack your cell and use it to reproduce. Your body obviously doesn't just let that happen. It tries to, first it has to find it. Some people's bodies are better at finding it than others. It basically uses a sensor protein to try to find it. Now RNA has the ability to reproduce without going and being processed by your DNA, which is in the nucleus right here. So that's important to keep in the back of your head, because some of the vaccines we're going to talk about also do the same thing. So it bypasses the nucleus, so the nucleus doesn't have to process it. So anyway, for this point, you just see the sensor here. This is what's supposed to happen. The sensor says something's here. And then the messenger RNA from our nucleus says, oh, we better make this interferon here. And this interferon over here are these little blue balls. And basically what that does is it blocks the other cells that haven't been infected yet from being infected by the virus by filling that ACE2 receptor. Just interferes with it. And what that does, or what it's supposed to do, is block the other cells from being infected. So it reduces the effectiveness of the virus to find more and more cells to make more and more virus factories. What also happens is that you have these other certain types of cells that also react to the foreign invader, right? Your body's not just going to sit there. You gotta kind of view this, I view this as like a war zone. Your body is actively fighting off some invader that's hijacking your own cells and using it against you. So you have these types of cells right here, which are all helping you to fight a foreign invader. You have these natural killer cells, which I kind of view as your patrollers. They automatically are patrolling the body. There'll be more concentrations at certain points of the body, but basically they're just, if you're a foreign invader, we don't know what you are, we're gonna lyse you. So lyse, basically, I just say that it's like bursting the cell from the inside out. It's kind of how I view it. And you should also view that as bursting, because I want to get the point across as fluid. You also have these dendritic cells, which also secrete type 1 interferons that would help block other ACE2 receptors of other cells from being able to bind with the virus. But these cells also, interesting enough right here, is that they'll, once they see the virus, they'll take a piece of it, peptides, that's basically just think of protein. They'll take the protein to the lymph node, and then the lymph node is like, oh my god, what is this? Well, we kind of have an idea, it's some type of virus. Let's send in our squad to kill it. And so the squad's going to be like, this is a specific squad because now we're going to know that virus is in some cells. And so this cytotoxic T cell is going to look a mission to kill. So it's going to be like, this is the target is this virus protein, and we have to eliminate this virus protein. So it's going to try to detect this virus protein and kill it. And the virus protein is in your cells. So basically the cytotoxic T cells lyse your infected cells. So now you're actually using your cytotoxic T cells to kill your own cells that are infected. So yeah, it's a lot of, I view it like a big war zone. And technically most times, for most people, the body can fight off COVID-19. That's why the death rate, well, it's very contagious. The death rate's very low. What can happen, and what does lead to fatalities, is the hyperimmune response. Some of the work cites it as a cytotoxic storm. And basically the damage from the virus load innate response, it can be inadequate, and then it slowly, the virus load just gets a bit bigger and bigger. Once you get to a severe virus load, your lymph nodes will keep pushing out these cytokine T cells to keep bursting your infected cells. Now, the lymph node's priority is to make these cytotoxic T cells instead of the other cells that it can make. So these other cells would be the T helper cells, B cells, right? So it's basically prioritizing these things to try to get rid of the virus fast as it can. And the cytotoxic T cells keep blowing up the virus, and now there's a lack of the other cells that the lymph node would also normally produce. So what you get from all this lysing of your own cells, and this is just part of it, is you get a huge amount of inflammation. And all that fluid from all this lysing, and then your body is also trying to get more white blood cells there. They're going to rush there, there's going to be more blood there, because the more blood's there, the more white blood cells will be there. So you kind of have this whole storm effect, and that's kind of what leads to the pneumonia in your lungs, and then you literally drown to death on land. So that's the fatal part of it. And then there is I just put a subsection down here for the mutation risk. It doesn't mutate as quickly as HIV or the common cold, or it doesn't seem to, as far as I can read into. But it can mutate, and therefore an antibody vaccine would likely want 2 binding sites to hold it down, or 2 different molecules, so that the virus doesn't become immune to it. And I'm personally thinking people who get it more than once, likely it's due to the body taking care of it very quickly the first time, and perhaps never having to trigger that adaptive or acquired response. So that's the lymph node process by a prolonged period. Just interferon from your normal T cells. Your patrollers kill it. You deal with it without having to really push the cytotoxic T cell storm, right? So the reason why I'm talking about it is the vaccine efforts and ideas from it. Basically, the science is attacking 4 different points. Viruses don't have too much else on their own besides that RNA. Literally made to get in, evade, and reproduce. Most antiviral drugs resemble nucleosides and as a result interfere with viral nucleic acid synthesis. What that means here is that just put the odds of this pool of genetic vaccines to be more probable based on previous history of how antiviral drugs have been successful. I do want to point out that Regeneron isn't on this slide, but it is interesting. I do want to knock it a little because the IV, when it's IV administered, so that's hard to give to 7 billion people, and it was 8 grams. So that's quite the just 8 milliliters, right? It's a lot of fluid. Anyway, so there's basically 4 pillars that they're attacking it from. One is to use almost like how the virus gets in. It's the same kind of idea. We'll go into more details on specific ones, but Moderna and BioNTech are both doing this. BioNTech is partnered with Pfizer, so a lot of the media will reference Pfizer. Pfizer is the manufacturer and distributor partner. AstraZeneca. So these are your viral ones, your viral vectors, viral protein, and basically you're going to see the same last 4 words in every one of these columns. They're all trying to stimulate an immune response, so make your body realize something's here, you got to deal with it. So you get that antiviral state quicker, so the virus load doesn't become so high that this forces your body to just pump out cyto T cells. Basically that's the goal, stimulate an immune response, get those interferons going, let your body realize you are in a war, right? Those are the 4 primary areas that they're doing. So they're all fairly interesting. Pfizer is going to be first up, I think, for their phase 3 in November. And I do want to point out that these things aren't mutually exclusive. Like the success of BioNTech doesn't mean Moderna is not successful, right? And more importantly, Pfizer, one of the best manufacturers and distributors, they're saying they can do 1 billion doses in a year. I mean, if they can, 1 billion is not 7 billion, right? So you need a lot of distribution and manufacturing to get the world to be vaccinated. There are also antibody clinical efforts. So that's the Regeneron one. That's the one that I kind of knocked because of the size and the fact that you need an IV. It's going to be hard to do a standard of care with an IV, right? They're all going to go to the hospital and get your 8 milliliters in. But anyway, the antibodies are also going to be very interesting. See Eli Lilly's there. There's a couple other ones down here. So there's a lot of response to this virus. It's not like the world's just sitting here saying it's going to go away. They're working on it. So what this means, again, this is another MIT slide. So these guys have great information. I mean, as is typical, the most informative stuff seem to have very low views. So I suggest you go there and check it out from source, because everything I've said today is from those presentations. I think it's about 7 hours worth so far. But it's super good. So these are the main vaccine questions you have to ask. One I do want to point out here is the require a cold chain. So that basically means, does the vaccine need to be kept cold during the whole distribution period, right? You're trying to ship it all across the world, all around the world, you got to keep it cold. And how durable the immunity of the vaccine induces, right? How long does it last for? Can enough vaccine be made? So the first, I'm only going to jump into 3 ideas for direct vaccines and then my overall thoughts. BioNTech specializes in messenger RNA vaccines, and Pfizer is the partner with the heavy-duty manufacturing distributor. So a couple good points about this vaccine is that more than 44,000 healthy subjects been dosed with this vaccine already, and it's highly scalable production, which means it's not cost prohibitive. So their lead variant is 162B2, and this one is targeting the RBD instead of directly hitting the spike. So that's interesting. So that's the binding domain site. And basically when you see MNRA, this is just a Wikipedia little insert here, is that when you see messenger RNA vaccine, usually they're intended to induce production of antibodies which will bind to potential pathogens. BioNTech and Pfizer say they're going to be able to do 1.3 billion doses by the end of 2021. Quite a lot of doses. It does have to be in a cold chain, so you got to keep it cold. It will last for 5 days in the fridge. So that's something to keep in the back of your head, because obviously when you go to the warmer countries, it's going to be more expensive to keep it colder. But yeah, so far the data, it looks good. So we'll have to see what the phase 3 data says, right? This is probably the favorite, I would say, or maybe the more likely. But so far the data from the papers that I went through really quickly went good. I just put this one here because you could see the viral RNA copies, just the effect of the BNT, so that's the blue one here. And so far, during this phase 3, there hasn't been a stop to this trial or anything, which is another good sign, right? And we're almost near the end now. I mean, they're expecting to release the results in less than a month from this phase 3, and that's a lot of people. And then, obviously, once they get the results, FDA has to look at it, and then it will be approved for COVID or not approved, right? So Moderna, it's a similar idea. So messenger RNA, this one's interesting. So basically, like I said, when the virus gets in, it starts replicating itself. This one, you have the drug, and it's also going into your cell, and it's going to, this is the encoded mRNA from the company. Basically, it's going to tell your cell to make this type of protein, and this is the SARS protein. So basically, it's going to make this might sound weird, but basically, it's making your body produce this viral cell protein, the protein from the virus that your own body is going to make. And what this will do is that it'll be like, your body's going to look at it and be like, what the heck, it's a foreign invader. And then they're just going to do the whole immune response without the actual virus there. So it makes those interferons and all that. So it's going to be, and then your body might remember it. So that's the science. It's pretty interesting, actually. And they have a whole pipeline at Moderna for similar stuff with messenger RNA. The ideas are fairly similar, but they're different, but fairly similar. So you can see room temperature 12 hours, same thing, a little bit longer in the fridge, but still has the same cold chain issue. So Molecular Partners is another one. This is a Switzerland one. Not too many people have noticed. The other companies are already worth billions of dollars, right? So this is like my black horse, if you will. They use DARPins. So basically, they have a pool of all these different types of antibodies. And so what they did was they went through their pool, which, I don't know if you can read that, that's 10 to the power 12. So quite a lot to choose from. And they went through which ones are going to bind to the spike protein of the coronavirus. Basically, which ones are going to hold it in place so it can't get to your cells and reproduce. So they picked 3. Really, 2 of them do work. Well, one is the primary work, and the other one kind of just is like the insurance policy that makes it so the virus doesn't mutate on you and then makes the active antibody, not effective anymore. So it's kind of cool. It's like a little team of antibodies, 2 different ones, and then a third one that just increases the half-life to fight the virus. So it's pretty interesting here, and you can see them how they bind the 2 molecules. So this is the active one, or the primary one, I should say. It's the 420, the best-in-class RBD inhibitor. And then 423 is the only multi-mode approach, so it binds to different sites. They're not competing for the same site on the cell, on the spike protein rather. So it is fairly interesting science. Unlike the other companies, this company is worth 500 million. And this one, it's interesting as well because this one does not require frozen. It can be stored for years at 4 degrees, so fridge temperature. Very little supply chain management relative to the other ones, which need to be frozen, and then if you're going to administer it soon, then you can put it in the fridge. And this is also easy to manufacture. So I like this one from a speculative point of view. 1, because no one really knows about it, and 2, because the science looks interesting. And it's slightly different than the other 2. And don't get me wrong, just because I didn't talk about Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca, the Oxford, I'm aware of it. I just wanted to focus on these ones. The video's already going to be longer than I want. So the potential strat. So if you buy into that narrative of the vaccine before the end of 2020 year, you could try to pick the primary vaccine winner. I think it's going to be difficult because the data is all blind. That's why I looked at these ones. I believe that Pfizer and Moderna are probably going to be the likely ones. And the black horse in the long run might be Molecular Partners because just the economics and non-cold chain. So far, it's earlier in the trial, so it's not as proven. For all I know, it could fail tomorrow, right? There's a reason why this one is cheaper, and the reason why not so many people know about it. But based on the factors that I'm looking at, that one looks very interesting, because that's one that you could really have in every doctor's office, right? Someone comes in with a COVID symptom, you stick them with this, your body's able to fight it off. I think that's very interesting, and the dose is low as well, similar to Pfizer's. Those are also all important things, and it's easy to scale the manufacture. But we also don't know the economics of the vaccine, right? Most of them kind of talked about that they make money in the developed world and then lose money in the emerging world, right? That makes sense. the costs are in the developed world, right? My thinking on a direct vaccine play would be to buy now and sell the hype after the pop. One of the things I don't know is that will the market think that one vaccine that's approved reduces likelihood of the other vaccines, right? All of a sudden, say if Pfizer gets approved, does Moderna sell off? I don't know. So the second point, if we believe the vaccine narrative, the trash code trade. So this is the companies that have just been hammered. They might have bankruptcy risk. So if you assume they can bridge that 2021 vaccine rollout year, then it could be an interesting time to buy them, right? But that you need to really dig and see what companies can make it. Like, is Carnival going to be able to make it to 2021? So far, they got financing at 11%. And then if a vaccine is approved, does that mean that more people are more likely to lend to Carnival, and therefore actually making it even more likely that they make it? So it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's not just Carnival. Like, you could do that with airlines. You could do the thinking with hotels, even like Las Vegas gambling. So there's lots of interesting ways to try to do this trash code trade. I'm going to probably start looking at companies that are currently cash flow neutral, so they're not losing money and they're not making money, but in the history of their past, they have been able to make money at normal when the economies open up. So I'm looking at that. I'm going to be looking at that for certain ideas. And that way I kind of hedge the risk. If things don't get better, they don't go bankrupt. And if they slowly do get better, they're going to say the company's down 40%, I'm slowly going to get that up, right? When it normalizes. So that's how I'm kind of thinking at it. But I got to dig into a couple more. I got like 10 ideas. The third point, it's a vaccine at these low interest rates. It likely validates the continued rollout of the bonds as inflation expectations at the end of the yield curve increases. Again, that's conjecture. If you have a vaccine, you might have inflation expectations increase because the government is still, well, they already did stimulate it quite a bit. And then they might do it again after the election. I mean, this is before the election results, so let's see how that goes as well. But I view both. Whoever wins is going to stimulate the economy. But could be wrong. I expected it earlier than it already has been. So if you do that, you could rotate from, say, to tips. Most people have already done that, so it's kind of crowded. It may be better served just rotating to the crap and value, right? And we've already been looking at value for quite some time. If the stimulus with the vaccine is too high, so the combination of both together, it will likely lead to inflation, reflation, or stagflation. You don't really know. Most times you're going to get reflation because the government will just keep pushing it. And usually the government gets what they want over time. What that means, though, is I just want some assets that will hold and do well and hold value. So utility is a good way to play stagflation. REITs are also fairly steady. Some REITs have actually could be a COVID vaccine play, right? If your REIT has been hammered and their retail, if there's a vaccine, eventually the retail might pick back up, right? So there's lots of levers with this kind of thinking. So another one, additional sectors could rally with some normalization. So this one, energy. I mean, energy got hammered in COVID. Less demand, less jet fuel, less travel, internationally or otherwise. So that could be interesting, especially if you have a devaluing dollar, if they do keep stimulating. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out for energy. Some of them will be able to weather the storm, and others will not. So you gotta look at the balance sheets for that energy play if you're going to skin it that way. You could also just try to buy a few call options and try to time it with a short theta duration, say from like the mid-November to the end of February. Just try to time it. The thing that sucks about that is that most of the crap companies you buy call options on have a high vega because they're so volatile. So you need a move in order to make money, right? So you might have to get a 10% move just to break even over that whole duration. So not without risks. And there's a lot of different ways to play a trash or a vaccine play rather. And then my other thoughts are just the high debt levels that were issued during COVID will likely limit the high end of the interest rates for a long time. And therefore there'll be a low R, so a low discount rate for most valuations for a long period out. So that just means all the companies that were able to get money have gotten money, and they've got it at extremely attractive low interest rates. Like some companies that I talked about have been able to refinance at rates much lower than what they were able to get in the past, even though technically their underlying fundamentals were way worse. So very interesting dynamic out there. And if the normal economy does start coming back from the vaccine confidence, it may actually lead to the rotation out of the outperforming tech stocks back into cheaper assets. So I'm just going to show two little things. So what I mean by rotating out is that I still have some long-term bonds that I bought, let's say in 2018. Yeah, that might not look amazing at 7% for 2 years, but this is on a risk-adjusted basis. This is literally government bonds, right? I'm probably going to rotate out of this, and I might also rotate out of some tech things that I've been in that have done quite well. We'll have to see. I also own Zendesk, so I'm probably going to look at that next week as well. I got a lot to go through to try to get my head into this vaccine idea and the trash trade maybe from it. Anyway, I'd like to know your thoughts on it. This is a little bit of a rambling video because I didn't have a specific stock to focus on, so my brain's kind of going all over the place, but I'd like to know your thoughts on it, and yeah, probably gonna have this room all done up for Halloween pretty quick here, so have a great rest of your day.